Hello, everyone. So I wanted to do a quick update video on impeachment, but first I want to just talk about AOC's taking down of Mayor Pete or Mayo Pete on Twitter. Um, Mayor Pete released this ad that was attacking College for All, not calling Warren or Bernie out by name, but clearly that's a jab at them, saying like, "Well, I want to make college affordable, but some people say it doesn't count unless you pay for rich people's college." So, yeah, I figured it's just good to kind of take down these talking points, and I think that AOC did a good job at just making it very succinct. Just making it easy for people to understand, and hopefully would even convince people that were naysaying it. So she's responding to the ad on Twitter. So it's kind of like a thread. So I'll start from the top here. So this is a GOP talking point used to dismantle public systems, and it's sad to see a Dem candidate adopt it. Let's talk about why Republicans are wrong on this. Just like rich kids can attend public school, they should be able to attend tuition-free public college. Here's why. 1. Universal public systems are designed to benefit everybody. Everyone contributes and everyone enjoys. We don't ban the rich from public schools, firefighters, or libraries because they are public goods. I'll add in police too. Why not? It's like 2. Universal systems that benefit everyone are stronger because everyone's invested. 3. When you start carving people out and adding asterisks to who can benefit from goods that should be available to all, cracks in the system develop. 4. Many children of the elite want to go to private IBS schools anyway, which aren't covered by tuition-free public college. 5. Lastly, and I can't believe we have to remind people of this, but it's good to have classrooms from pre-K through college to be socially, economically integrated. Having students from different incomes and backgrounds in the same classroom is good for society and economic mobility. So, pretty clear and straightforward to understand. I mean, we don't ban rich people from, certain public goods, like going to a public park, as an example. So, it's like, at the end of the day, like, you could raise taxes on the wealthy in order to pay for this too. And we've seen it in the past now. Like if I remember the numbers correctly, there was an increase in the military budget of $80 billion, and they found out that college for all for the year would have cost $60 billion. So just the increase alone in the military budget would have paid for public college for a year. So we can definitely afford this. The thing is that you have to understand is that when people ask in the media, like, how are we going to pay for this? They, it's not an objective thing. Like, they're not being neutral and asking it about every issue. They're asking it about things that are going to benefit everyday people. And it's not exactly the biggest benefit to the rich. I mean, like she says, like, most rich kids will go to private schools. They're not going to public schools. Um, so it's like if it doesn't specifically benefit the rich, then yeah, then they're gonna just naysay it all day, and it's gaslighting. It's trying to tell you, it's like, no, you can't have this good thing. Why? Well, it's yeah, we can't do that. It's like, but that's really what it comes down to. Every other country has this. But and I think her last point is also kind of important too, because it's like it does imply this kind of segregation of classes, and it's like, oh well, the rich kids can't be going to public schools. I mean that's ridiculous, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, if it's universally tuition free for everyone, and whoever were to pass this, like, they're likely going to raise taxes on the wealthy. So really they're paying more into it, and it's like, I don't know, would people start making the point, like, if we pass if you pass a college for all, like more rich kids will start going to public schools and stuff. Well, first of all, I don't know that it will be a significant amount of them. I don't know what percentage exactly, but yeah, any amount of integration of exposing yourself to new people, new kinds of people is good for the country because you honestly learn more and you can kind of humble yourself. You can see what life is like on the other side. Like if you were born into privilege, then yeah, you'll see that it's not like that for everyone. So I just want to touch on that. Obviously, Mayo Pete is a joke and a half. But I mean, I think he's the only centrist now that has a real shot. Kamala Harris has dropped out. The other ones are pretty irrelevant in my view. Biden is still in the lead, but I think that will dissipate. I don't think he can last that long because it just seems odd to me, like how he's lasted as long as he has, considering how crazy he says, just says anything. But you know, yeah, I think Buttigieg is really the only centrist that has a shot. And Warren, I wouldn't call Warren a centrist. I think she's just a progressive with certain neoliberal tendencies. Excuse me, but she has a shot too. So it's really the top four at this point for me. Oh well, not if you're taking the Harvard Harris poll apparently because they released this poll that said like if Hillary were to jump in the race, she would become the front runner, which she's not running. She said she's not going to run. I mean, who's to say that she should like retract that and just jump in just because of her ego? But I mean, it's crazy. You look at somebody. I understand why people may not like polls because it's just like depending on where you're getting the source from. It's like this is clearly kind of elitist. It's like Harvard Harris poll, and like she's at the top. I mean, she's literally at the top when they ask that question. It's like I don't know how that could be. But I think it's skewed because like that's a particular sect of people that are taking that poll. I have to assume. I mean, I don't know what their methodology was. If they asked people of all different backgrounds and what went into that, but for one thing, yeah, it's like you're supposed to take polls on aggregate, excuse me. So it's not just one poll that really matters. But let's get to impeachment. We had a Judiciary Committee vote on Thursday, which passed, which means it's going to go to the full House vote, where I think it will probably pass the House. It's a Democratic majority. And the Judiciary Committee, like they were, talking about essentially, yeah, like the legality of everything unfolding with this. And of course, yeah, like the Democrats, like it's their duty to kind of make the case for why he should be impeached. And then let me just say what the articles of impeachment are. So one was for the phone call, of course, to the Ukrainian president. And they've outlined extensively like why that essentially was a quid pro quo, but despite what Trump says, like I'm the least quid pro quo president of all time. It's like, okay. And second was for not cooperating with Congress. There were these subpoenas being issued about his business dealings, and he's not really cooperating. It's weird. Like Trump will say weird things. Like he'll say that I would testify, but it's like if you were gonna do that, like he could have just done it. Does anyone think that if Trump actually wanted to testify before Congress, that it wouldn't get done? He could do it if he wants to, and I think he knows that he's hiding something. It's a little bit hard to see, exactly where Trump is coming from within all this. In other words, like, does he know that he's completely lying? Does he think that what he did wasn't wrong? Did he realize after the fact that it probably was not the best thing to do, and now he's just covering his ass? Like, It's a little hard to tell. I would tend to think though that since this phone call happened like the day after Mueller testified before Congress, so I think he kind of realized nothing was going to happen with Russia. So I think he realized, I could get away with stuff like this. um, but I don't think he thought of it as like something nefarious that he's doing. Like he probably knew, like, yeah, we don't want to keep this in the public sphere, right? Yeah, but I think he wasn't thinking about what consequences that were, because he's the president, and to him it's like he can do anything. I would agree with that. Um, but I think it's worth noting though that the Trump administration, they've been obstructionist, on a lot of different fronts. It's not just with impeachment. There's a lot of issues with oversight and regulation, like with the EPA as an example. Um, there's just this concerted effort in the Trump administration, and I guess in conservatism in general, but it's just been ramped up to overdrive now with Trump. But there's this effort to kind of tear down bureaucracy, and it's the idea, like, if it's a bureaucracy, it's bad. But no, I mean, certain bureaucracies, you need that in order to make sure that people aren't getting harmed. Like in the case of pollution, yeah, you know taking away certain regulations and oversight is not going to be good for people, clearly, and that's just one example. But Trump is apparently trying to go to the Supreme Court to challenge these subpoenas into his business dealings, and they agreed to hear the case. Um, I think maybe the loophole that gets him out of this is like it's about specific subpoenas. It's not. It seems to me like it's. I don't see how you couldn't tie it to what's happening with impeachment now, but I think that might be the only loophole. Is like it's not specifically like Trump saying, "Oh, I'm fighting against impeachment. This is unfair. I want to be able to challenge impeachment." Well, he is figuring out a way to do that without, it's a loophole, like I'm saying. So I still consider it to be, obstructive, and I've heard some people make some pretty weird cases on the left now, people that I actually respect a lot, and I don't really know what to think of it, because it's like, well, he has three choices, really. Um, he can cooperate. That's obviously within his power to cooperate with Congress, go before them and testify. Like I said, like he's perfectly able to do that if he wants to. He can do what he's doing now, I guess, and go to court and try and challenge the subpoenas, or just do nothing, like try and not cooperate at all. Now, the last two, not cooperating or going to court, it seems to me like there's a difference between them that doesn't really mean all that much, because if he's fighting the whole process anyways, is there anything better to that than not doing anything at all? You know, I suppose by fighting it in court, and if Trump were to lose, like, it forces his hand, but you got to force his hand either way in either scenario. So I don't really get how you could argue that Trump is not like cooperating. And so yeah, people have been saying some pretty weird things. I don't want to name names here, but um, so Adam Schiff made his speech before a press conference or whatever it was, and I think he makes the case well for why Trump should be impeached, and why what he did was wrong. But again, if you're not following the issues closely, like, people are not going to really care, in my opinion. It's just they've picked this issue to go after Trump on, and people were upset with Russia interference. That's for sure. But then it blew over. People look at a lot of the human rights abuses that Trump does. I think they really do look at the worst things that he's done, the things he said that like denigrate people, entire races of people. Um, I think on an overall scale, the Ukraine phone call issue just does not rank very highly for people in terms of importance. For a certain sect of people that really follow this stuff closely, yeah, they understand it. But I think people get a sense that this is a they're doing this for political purposes. The Democrats, and they're trying to, or Nancy Pelosi at least is trying to say that's not the case. It's all about Constitution and patriotism. But again, like you have to imagine the scenario that Trump doesn't get removed from office. Um, I definitely agree that the Democrats probably did have to do this because if they didn't impeach, they probably would suppress their base. That they would, the Democrat voters would be like, well, they're not holding Trump accountable, so I don't see why I should support them. Um, I don't know how big a percentage of those people are that would be discouraged from that, but I think you would probably see a dampening of support. But again, that doesn't mean that it could still hurt them in the end because the way they're going about this is very key. And so, like I'm saying, like you need a you need something beyond just these little press moments, these little standout moments, like when Adam Schiff kind of lays out the case very clear. You need a message that is gonna last. It's got to be able to be communicated in a way that's easy for people to understand, and it's not going to take a lot to convince them. Because if you know that Trump will probably not get removed from office, then I think you have to win in the court of public opinion. You have to make sure that when he is ultimately not removed, that he's still disliked and that his approval ratings don't go up. But I think Nancy Pelosi really ruins a lot of the chances with what's going on here with the public perception. And I don't know if it's an age thing. Like I mean I shouldn't say it's an age thing because I like Bernie. But I mean Biden acts up a little crazy too. So it's not age. It's some people when they get to that age they're not very with it. Depends on the person. But I think Nancy Pelosi, like, she says some crazy things sometimes, and I don't know how. Like, she thought this would be okay to go on a town hall and make these statements where she was like, so she was asked, like, why didn't you impeach Bush over Iraq? And Sam Cedar on the Majority Report said she was bragging. I think that's completely true because she was saying that she's on the Intelligence Committee and that she knew Bush was not telling the truth about WMDs. She knew it was a lie and still thought it was not an impeachable offense. Now look, I'm not a constitutional expert. Okay, I don't know based on the letter of the law if there's like a particular thing that would have meant that this is unconstitutional for Bush to have done that. Um, I'm saying like I can't like point to the specific part of the Constitution or part of the law, whatever. I can't do that for you. But what I can do is say like make that case as hard and as long as you can, because you're talking about lying the American people into a war with a country that didn't attack us, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians and soldiers, getting us mired in endless war. So, I'm not for the nuanced trolling. I'm not gonna stand here and say like, oh well, it's not according to the rules. There's no rule that says that Bush can't do this, right? It's like If that were the case, I don't even know if it's the case, but let's just say what Bush did was perfectly constitutional. I would still support impeaching him because, on principle, you have to attack on these things. You have to attack on wrongdoing, and it should be a moral choice. You have to go case by case. You have to see what is the benefit to impeaching on this particular issue. And I think with the Ukraine thing, there's not a lot of benefit unless you can convince the Republicans to jump to your side, which I am assuming is their angle to this, because there's no other benefit to just pursuing this angle of impeachment. They're trying to get Republicans on an issue where they'll be swayed and they understand because that's the thing is like Republicans wouldn't care about corruption with Saudi Arabia. They wouldn't care about bombing Yemen. Some of them might, like Rand Paul, but overall, not a lot would care about that. So they're trying to pick an issue where they're actually going to have a moment of pause. But I don't think it'll ultimately pan out because I don't think a lot of Republican politicians would vote against their base. The base loves Trump, and I think their hands are tied. They are not going to vote against their own voters. I mean, they won't support impeachment if they know it's the end of their political career. So I think again, you got to win in the court of public opinion. You have to show people why Trump is so toxic. And yeah, on one hand, if you haven't been convinced that Trump is bad at this point, then how are you going to be convinced now? But I think, yeah, because this is impeachment, because news stations will cover this like crazy. If you were to actually talk about serious issues like our involvement with aiding a genocide in Yemen with Saudi Arabia, if you put important issues to the forefront, they'll actually get a lot of big news press coverage, I think. But because it's only on this is what all we hear about. So I think there's just such disconnect with Nancy Pelosi because she really thinks that everyone thinks like her, and that we don't see that this is kind of clearly a political calculation. She also said that she knew it could potentially help Trump get reelected. So she was asked by Jake Tapper, if you saw the exit polls and saw that impeachment helped Trump get reelected, would you still do it? And she said she would, out of patriotism and defending the Constitution. This is a matter of principle. And again, like I'm saying, I don't know with Bush. I would tend to think, yeah, that's a war crime, unconstitutional what he did. I'm just saying I'm not enough of an expert to point the specific clause of the Constitution that would make that illegal. I'm just not sure about that. But regardless, it makes it hard for me to believe Pelosi is like super principled and cares about the Constitution, because she wouldn't go after Bush. She wouldn't fight tooth and nail on that issue. And in fact, she knew more than the American people knew, and she still wouldn't do it. So I think people look at what's going on and think it's kind of a clown show. And so the full House vote is next week. A lot of people have been criticizing kind of how the impeachment process has been sped up a lot. And I'm assuming that's because they don't want they're, I guess, planning for Trump to not be removed from office in the Senate, so they don't want his approval ratings to shoot up, too close to the 2020 election. So I guess the thinking is like to get it out of the way early enough that it will be out of people's minds. But look, I think you need a strong Democratic message to beat Trump, and so you tie it to impeachment by by pointing out all of his wrongdoings and then saying what should have happened, because that's like a win-win, really. You shoehorn what the right policy is, and people can get behind that and see that the Democrats are serious about taking on these issues, and you're exposing why Trump is so bad in his handling of virtually everything. So, um, with impeachment in the Democrats, it's been pretty mixed because once it gets to the Senate, like I am saying, I think it will die in the Senate. Um, it's virtually no shot because you need 20 Republicans in order to pass in the Senate. And people also need to understand that if Trump gets removed, full impeachment, whatever, he is. It's the same thing as an indictment, so it's not like Trump is just going to jail right away. Um, this is kind of panning out to look a lot like what happened with the Mueller report, where it's like, oh, there's this kind of smoking gun thing here, but there's really not much we can do about it. So, you know, best of luck to the Democrats, but I wish that they would up their game a little bit more.